Sarah Martinez had always believed that life was predictable if you planned it well enough. At 34, she had built what she considered a perfectly balanced existence. By day, she worked as a senior intelligence analyst for a government agency that most people had never heard of. By night and, on weekends, she was simply mom to 8-year-old Emma, a bright-eyed girl who collected butterflies and asked questions that could stump university professors. The morning of October 15th started like any other Tuesday. Sarah dropped Emma off at Roosevelt Elementary, watching through the rearview mirror as her daughter's backpack bounced with each enthusiastic step toward the school entrance. Emma turned back once, as she always did, to wave goodbye. Sarah waved back, not knowing it would be the last normal moment they would share for a very long time. The call came at 2:47 p.m., just as Sarah was reviewing satellite imagery from Eastern Europe. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, and completely devastating. "Ms. Martinez? This is Cedar Hills Hospital. Your daughter Emma has been brought to our emergency department following an incident at school." Sarah's world tilted. The satellite images blurred on her screen as every maternal instinct screamed to life. "What happened? Is she okay? There was an accident during recess. She fell from the climbing structure. We need you here immediately." The 20-minute drive to the hospital felt like an eternity. Sarah's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles went white. She tried calling the school, but the line was busy. Every red light felt like a personal attack, every slow driver an obstacle specifically placed to keep her from her child. Cedar Hills Hospital's emergency entrance was bustling with the usual chaos of medical urgency. Sarah burst through the automatic doors, her badge from work still clipped to her jacket, her analytical mind trying to process the sterile smell of disinfectant and the constant beeping of machines. "Emma Martinez," she said to the receptionist, her voice steadier than she felt. 8 years old. Brought in from Roosevelt Elementary. The woman's fingers clicked across the keyboard with maddening slowness. "Room 7 in the pediatric wing. Take the elevator to the second floor." Sarah's heels clicked rapidly against the linoleum as she hurried down the hallway. Through the small window in the door of room 7, she could see Emma lying on a hospital bed that seemed enormous compared to her small frame. Her daughter's usual wild curls were matted against her forehead, and there was a bandage wrapped around her head. Dr. Patricia Chen, the attending physician, met Sarah outside the room. She was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the sort of calm demeanor that comes from years of delivering both good and terrible news to families. "Ms. Martinez, I'm Dr. Chen. Emma is conscious and stable, which is very good news. However, she has sustained a significant head injury. The fall was from approximately 12 feet, and she landed primarily on her left side." Sarah felt her knees weaken. "How significant?" "We've done initial scans, and there's evidence of intracranial pressure. We need to operate immediately to relieve the pressure and prevent any permanent damage. The surgery is complex but necessary." The words hit Sarah like physical blows. Surgery. Brain surgery. On her 8-year-old daughter, who had been perfectly fine that morning, worrying about her science project on monarch butterflies. "Can I see her?" Dr. Chen nodded. "Of course. But we need to move quickly. The surgical team is preparing now." Emma looked impossibly small against the white hospital sheets. Her eyes were open but unfocused, and when she saw Sarah, she tried to smile. It was a weak attempt, but it was purely Emma. "Mom?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." Sarah took Emma's hand, careful not to disturb the 4-line tape to her small wrist. Emma's hand felt cold, too cold. "My head hurts," Emma said, her words slightly slurred. "And I can't remember, did I finish my butterfly project?" Sarah's heart broke a little more. Even injured, Emma was worried about her schoolwork. "Don't worry about that now, sweetheart. We just need to focus on getting you better." A nurse appeared beside them, her scrubs decorated with cartoon animals. "We need to prep Emma for surgery now," she said gently.
Surgery? Emma's eyes widened with the first real sign of fear Sarah had seen.
Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand. The doctors need to help make your head feel better.
It's going to be okay. Will you be there?
Emma asked, her voice small and scared. I'll be right outside, Sarah promised, though every fiber of her being wanted to demand that she be allowed to stay with Emma through everything.
Dr. Chen reappeared with a clipboard full of consent forms.
As Sarah signed her name again and again, authorizing various procedures and acknowledging risks, each signature felt like she was signing away pieces of her soul. The surgery will take approximately 4 to 6 hours, Dr. Chen explained. We'll have updates for you periodically, but I want to be clear about the risks involved. Any brain surgery carries the possibility of complications. There could be effects on motor function, speech, memory, or cognition. However, without this surgery, the pressure in her brain will continue to build, and that presents even greater risks.
Sarah nodded, trying to process information that seemed too enormous to fully grasp. 4 to 6 hours of not knowing.
4 to 6 hours of hoping that her daughter would still be Emma when it was over. They wheeled Emma away on a gurney, her small hand slipping from Sarah's as they moved down the hallway toward the operating rooms. Sarah watched until they turned a corner and disappeared from sight. The waiting room was a study in institutional compassion. Beige walls, comfortable but forgettable furniture, and a television playing daytime programs that no one was really watching. Sarah chose a chair that gave her a clear view of the hallway where the doctors would eventually emerge with news. She called her sister Maria, who lived 2 states away but promised to catch the next available flight. She called her supervisor at work, explaining that she would need emergency family leave.
She called Emma's school, speaking with the principal who was clearly shaken by the incident.
It happened so fast, Principal Williams explained.
Emma was at the top of the climbing structure with some friends.
Another child accidentally bumped into her, and she lost her balance. We called 911 immediately. Sarah tried not to think about that moment of impact, about Emma falling through the air, about the split second when everything changed. Instead, she focused on practical things. She made lists in her head of people to call, things to arrange, work projects that would need to be reassigned. An hour into the surgery, her work phone buzzed with an encrypted message. It was from her handler, Agent Rodriguez, asking about her availability for an urgent assignment. Sarah stared at the message for a long moment before typing back a simple response: family emergency.
Unavailable indefinitely.
2 hours in, a surgical nurse came out to update her.
Emma is doing well. Dr. Chen has successfully accessed the area of concern and is working on relieving the pressure. Everything is proceeding as planned.
Sarah nodded and thanked the nurse, though as planned seemed like an odd phrase when talking about her daughter's brain surgery. Nothing about this day had gone as planned. 3 hours in, Maria arrived, still wearing her work clothes and carrying a hastily packed overnight bag. The sisters embraced in the waiting room, and, for the first time since receiving that phone call, Sarah allowed herself to cry. She's going to be okay, Maria said, though they both knew it was as much a prayer as a statement of fact. She has to be, Sarah whispered against her sister's shoulder. 4 hours in, Sarah found herself staring at the television screen without seeing it, her mind cycling through memories of Emma.
Emma's first steps, taken in their tiny apartment while Sarah was juggling night classes and a part-time job. Emma's first day of kindergarten, when she had insisted on wearing her butterfly costume because it made her feel brave. Emma's recent obsession with becoming a marine biologist, inspired by a documentary about coral reefs. 5 hours in, Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway of the waiting room, still in surgical scrubs but no longer wearing her surgical cap. Her expression was carefully neutral, the kind of professional calm that could mean anything. Sarah and Maria stood simultaneously, hands instinctively reaching for each other. The surgery went very well, Dr. Chen said, and Sarah felt her legs almost give out with relief.
We were able to successfully relieve the pressure, and there were no complications.
Emma is being moved to recovery now. Will she be okay? Sarah asked.
The next 24 to 48 hours will be critical for monitoring, but all indications are positive. We won't know the full extent of any effects until she's fully conscious and we can do some cognitive assessments, but I'm cautiously optimistic. Sarah sank back into her chair, feeling like she had been holding her breath for 5 hours straight.
Emma was okay. She was going to be okay. When can I see her? Sarah asked.
She'll be in recovery for about an hour, and then we'll move her to the pediatric intensive care unit. You'll be able to sit with her there, though she'll be heavily sedated for the rest of today. As Dr. Chen left to check on other patients, Sarah realized that her ordeal was far from over.
Recovery would be long and uncertain.
There would be physical therapy, cognitive assessments, and a long period of careful monitoring. But Emma was alive, the surgery was successful, and, for now, that was everything. Maria went to get coffee and call their parents, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts. She pulled out her personal phone and scrolled through the photos she had taken of Emma just that morning, getting ready for school.
Emma's gap-toothed grin as she held up her completed math homework. Emma's serious expression as she packed her butterfly field guide in her backpack for show and tell.
Her work phone buzzed again.
Another message from Rodriguez: assignment is time-sensitive. Need confirmation of availability.
Sarah turned the phone off without responding. Whatever crisis the agency was dealing with would have to wait. Her only mission now was being there for Emma, helping her daughter heal, and figuring out how to navigate this new reality where everything felt fragile and uncertain.
An hour later, they allowed Sarah into the pediatric intensive care unit.
Emma looked even smaller in the ICU bed, surrounded by monitors and machines that beeped softly in rhythm with her vital signs. Her head was wrapped in bandages, and there were more 4 lines than Sarah remembered from before. But Emma was breathing on her own, her chest rising and falling in the steady rhythm of natural sleep. Sarah pulled a chair close to the bed and carefully took Emma's hand, being mindful of all the medical equipment. "I'm here, baby," she whispered.
"Mom's here." Emma didn't respond, lost in the deep sleep of post-surgical recovery, but Sarah imagined she felt Emma's hand tighten slightly around hers.
The ICU was quiet except for the constant chorus of medical machines. Other families were scattered throughout the unit, each dealing with their own medical crises, their own vigils of hope and fear. Sarah settled in for what she knew would be a long night of watching and waiting. She had no idea that in less than 12 hours, her work phone would ring with an emergency that would test every limit of her dedication to both her job and her family. For now, though, there was only Emma's steady breathing, the warm weight of her small hand in Sarah's, and the fierce maternal love that made everything else in the world seem secondary. Sarah had built her career on analyzing threats and making strategic decisions under pressure, but nothing in her professional training had prepared her for this kind of helplessness, this complete surrender to hope. She watched the monitors, learning to read Emma's vital signs like a new language she desperately needed to master. Heart rate, blood pressure, oxygen saturation, numbers that had become more important than any intelligence briefing she had ever received. Outside the ICU windows, the sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that Emma would have loved. Sarah made a mental note to describe the sunset to Emma when she woke up, knowing her daughter's fascination with the way light changed throughout the day. As the hours passed and Emma slept peacefully under the influence of medication and exhaustion, Sarah began to allow herself the luxury of imagining the future again.
Emma would recover.
She would go back to school, finish her butterfly project, and continue asking questions that challenged Sarah to see the world through curious 8-year-old eyes. Sarah had no way of knowing that within hours, her carefully compartmentalized life as both mother and intelligence agent would collide in ways she had never imagined possible. For now, she was simply a mother keeping vigil over her injured child, holding tight to hope and the promise of tomorrow. The ICU monitors provided their steady rhythm throughout the night, creating a mechanical lullaby that Sarah had grown accustomed to over the past 18 hours. Emma had awakened briefly around 3 a.m., confused and groggy from the medications, but she had recognized Sarah and asked for water.
The nurse said this was an excellent sign. Emma's cognitive function appeared to be intact.
Dr. Chen had stopped by during her morning rounds, cautiously optimistic about Emma's progress. The swelling in her brain was reducing as expected, and her responses to basic neurological tests were encouraging. They would need to keep Emma in the ICU for at least another day, but the trajectory was positive.
Sarah hadn't left Emma's bedside except for brief trips to the bathroom and the hospital cafeteria.
Maria had brought her a change of clothes and basic toiletries, understanding without being told that Sarah wasn't going anywhere until Emma was out of danger.
At 11:30 a.m. on Wednesday, Sarah's secure work phone rang.
She had turned the device back on that morning to send a more detailed message to her supervisor explaining the situation, but she had expected it to remain quiet.
The number on the display was Rodriguez's emergency line.
Sarah looked at Emma, who was dozing peacefully, then stepped into the hallway to take the call.
Martinez, she answered quietly.
Sarah, thank God. Rodriguez's voice was tight with stress. I know you're dealing with a family emergency, but we have a code black situation.
I need you to listen to me very carefully. Code black was the highest level of national security threat. Sarah had been involved in only 2 code black situations during her 8 years with the agency.
Both had required weeks of intensive work and had resulted in prevented terrorist attacks on American soil.
Rodriguez, I told you I'm unavailable. My daughter is in pediatric intensive care after brain surgery. I understand that, and I'm sorry. But this is bigger than anything we've dealt with before.
We have credible intelligence about an imminent biological attack on 3 major hospitals, including Cedar Hills Hospital where you are right now. Sarah felt the hallway seem to tilt around her.
What did you say?
A terrorist cell has developed a weaponized strain of bacteria that targets children specifically. They plan to introduce it into the pediatric units of Cedar Hills, Children's Medical Center downtown, and St. Mary's on the east side. The attack is scheduled for sometime in the next 6 hours. Sarah's mind raced, her analytical training clicking into high gear even as her maternal instincts screamed in panic.
What kind of bacteria? What's the timeline for symptoms? It's a modified strain of meningitis that's resistant to standard antibiotics.
Symptoms appear within 2 to 4 hours of exposure, and, without immediate treatment with a specific antidote, the mortality rate in children is over 90%.
The numbers hit Sarah like physical blows. Emma, still recovering from brain surgery, would be even more vulnerable than healthy children.
The entire pediatric ICU, filled with sick and injured children, would become a death zone.
What do you need from me?
Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer would tear her in two. We need you to coordinate the security response at Cedar Hills. You know the hospital layout now, you understand the medical protocols, and you're our best analyst for this type of threat assessment.
We have reason to believe the attack will come through someone with legitimate access to the pediatric unit.
Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of an impossible choice settling on her shoulders.
Rodriguez, I can't leave Emma. She just had brain surgery. She needs me here. Sarah, I understand what I'm asking.
But, if we don't stop this attack, Emma won't be the only child we lose today.
There are 43 children currently in the pediatric unit at Cedar Hills. Without your help, we might not be able to save any of them.
Through the window of Emma's room, Sarah could see her daughter sleeping peacefully, unaware that her mother was being asked to choose between her personal duty as a parent and her professional duty to protect innocent lives.
How certain is this intelligence? Sarah asked. As certain as we can be without it having already happened.
We intercepted communications, we have a source inside the cell, and we've identified the biological agent in a laboratory raid from this morning.
This is happening, Sarah. Sarah took a deep breath, her training warring with her instincts. What's the plan?
We're coordinating with local law enforcement and hospital security to evacuate non-critical patients and lock down the pediatric units at all 3 hospitals. But we need someone inside Cedar Hills who understands both security protocols and medical procedures. We need you to help us identify potential threats and coordinate the response.
And Emma?
She'll be safer if we prevent the attack than if we evacuate her in her current condition. Moving her now could be dangerous given her recent surgery.
Sarah knew Rodriguez was right, but the knowledge felt like swallowing glass. I need to talk to her medical team.
You have 30 minutes before our field team arrives.
Sarah,
I know this is impossible, but you're the best chance these kids have." The line went dead, leaving Sarah standing in the hospital hallway with the weight of an unthinkable decision. She walked back into Emma's room, where her daughter was beginning to stir.
"Mom?" Emma's voice was stronger than it had been the night before.
"I'm here, baby," Sarah said, taking Emma's hand. "I had weird dreams," Emma said, her words still slightly slurred from medication but much clearer than before.
"But I remember you being here. You stayed all night."
"Of course I did," Sarah said, her heart breaking.
"Emma, some people might come talk to us in a little while. They're going to help make sure the hospital is safe." Emma's eyes sharpened with concern that seemed too mature for an 8-year-old. "Is something wrong?" Sarah had always been honest with Emma, age-appropriately but honestly.
"There might be some people who want to hurt children in hospitals.
But there are good people working to stop them." "Like your work friends?" Emma asked. Sarah had never told Emma exactly what she did for work, describing it only as helping keep people safe. "Yes, like my work friends."
Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway, and Sarah stepped out to speak with her privately. "Doctor, I need to ask you something, and I need you to trust me.
If there were a biological threat to the pediatric unit, what would be the protocol?" Dr. Chen's expression became very serious very quickly. "What kind of biological threat?"
"Hypothetically, a weaponized bacteria that targets children specifically."
"Ms. Martinez, if you know something about a threat to this hospital I'm asking hypothetically about protocols," Sarah interrupted. "If Emma needed to be moved quickly, could she be safely transported?" Dr. Chen studied Sarah's face carefully. "Emma's condition is stable enough that she could be moved if absolutely necessary, but it would involve significant risk. Any transport would need to be with full monitoring equipment and medical staff." "Why are you asking this?" Before Sarah could answer, 3 people in dark suits appeared at the end of the hallway.
Rodriguez was easy to spot, a tall man with graying hair who moved with the efficient purpose Sarah remembered from their previous operations.
With him were 2 younger agents she didn't recognize. "Dr. Chen, those people need to speak with you about hospital security protocols.
Please tell them everything they need to know."
Dr. Chen looked confused but nodded. "Ms. Martinez, what's going on?"
"Something that requires me to do my job," Sarah said simply.
Rodriguez approached, his expression grim but professional. "Sarah, thank you. We have updates."
They moved to a small conference room near the ICU, where Rodriguez spread out building schematics and personnel files on the table. "The attack is planned for 2 p.m., during the shift change when security protocols are most relaxed. We've identified 3 potential vectors of attack: a maintenance worker hired 6 months ago with questionable background checks, a temporary nurse who started working here last week, and a visitor who's been coming to see a patient in the pediatric unit for the past 3 days but whose relationship to the patient can't be verified." Sarah studied the files, her analytical mind engaging fully for the first time since Emma's accident.
"The maintenance worker has access to the entire hospital, including air handling systems. If this is an airborne pathogen, that's your primary threat." "Agreed.
We have teams watching all 3 suspects, but we need someone inside the hospital who can coordinate with medical staff and identify any unusual activity."
"What about evacuation?" Sarah asked. "We're evacuating non-critical patients from all 3 hospitals under the cover of routine system maintenance."
"But children like Emma, who are in critical condition, are safer staying put with enhanced security than being moved."
Sarah nodded, understanding the logic but hating it. "What do you need me to do?"
Agent Wilson, one of the younger agents, pulled out a tablet with surveillance footage. "We need you to review security camera footage from the past week, looking for anything unusual. You know this hospital now better than any of us." For the next hour, Sarah divided her time between reviewing surveillance footage and checking on Emma. The footage showed the ordinary bustle of hospital life: medical staff, visitors, maintenance workers, delivery personnel. But Sarah's trained eye caught subtle details that might indicate reconnaissance or preparation for an attack. She spotted the maintenance worker, David Kowalski, spending an unusual amount of time near the pediatric ICU air intake vents. She noticed the temporary nurse, Jennifer Walsh, asking questions about pediatric medication protocols that seemed beyond her stated experience level. The suspicious visitor, identified only as John Miller, had been photographed near the medication storage areas on 2 separate occasions. At 1:15 p.m., Sarah was watching Emma sleep when her secure phone buzzed with a text from Rodriguez, "All teams in position.
Maintenance worker approaching PICU air handling system." Sarah's blood ran cold. The pediatric ICU air handling system would affect Emma directly.
She stepped into the hallway and called Rodriguez. "I'm staying with Emma," she said without preamble.
"Sarah, we need you coordinating. No. I'm done choosing between my job and my daughter.
I'm staying in this room, and if anyone tries to release a biological agent in this unit, they'll have to go through me."
There was silence on the line, then Rodriguez's voice, quieter than before. "Understood. We'll handle the apprehension."
Sarah returned to Emma's room and pulled her chair closer to the bed. Through the windows, she could see unusual activity in the hallway, more security guards than normal, people in suits talking quietly into phones, medical staff moving with purpose rather than routine.
Emma woke up and looked around with growing awareness. "Mom, something's happening, isn't it?" "Yes, baby. But it's going to be okay." "Is this because of your work?" Sarah took Emma's hand.
"Sometimes the work I do helps protect children in hospitals.
Like me?
Like you, and all the other children here."
At 1:45 p.m., Sarah's phone buzzed again, target apprehended. Biological agents secured. Threat neutralized. Relief flooded through Sarah so completely that she had to sit down. Emma was safe. All the children in the hospital were safe. "Is it over?" Emma asked, seeming to sense the change in her mother's tension. "Yes, it's over."
Dr. Chin appeared in the doorway, looking somewhat dazed.
"Ms. Martinez, there were some very interesting conversations happening in my hospital today."
"I'm sorry for any disruption," Sarah said.
"Don't apologize.
Those agents told me enough for me to understand that you helped prevent something terrible from happening to my patients."
Emma looked between her mother and Dr. Chen with growing curiosity. "Mom, do you fight bad guys?"
Sarah smiled, feeling exhausted but relieved beyond measure.
"Sometimes, baby. But mostly I just try to keep people safe." "Like a superhero?"
"More like a very tired person who loves you very much and wants to make sure you and other children can get better in hospitals without worrying about anything except getting well." Rodriguez appeared in the doorway, no longer looking quite as official as before.
"Sarah, thank you. We couldn't have done this without you." "Actually, you could have," Sarah said. "And you should have. I almost made the wrong choice today." "You made the only choice you could make," Rodriguez said. "You protected your daughter and 42 other children at the same time." After Rodriguez left, Sarah sat with Emma in the quiet of the ICU. The crisis was over, the threat was neutralized, and Emma was recovering beautifully. But Sarah knew that something fundamental had changed for her during those impossible hours of choosing between her roles as agent and mother. "Mom," Emma said sleepily, "when I grow up, I want to help protect children too." "You will, baby," Sarah said, squeezing Emma's hand. "In whatever way feels right to you." As Emma drifted back to sleep, Sarah realized that today had taught her something important about the balance between duty and love, between professional obligations and personal priorities. Sometimes the right choice wasn't about choosing between them, but about finding a way to honor both. The monitors continued their steady rhythm, no longer sounding ominous but reassuring. Emma was safe, the hospital was secure, and tomorrow they would begin the long process of recovery and healing. But first, Sarah thought, she needed to have a very serious conversation with her supervisor about the future of her career and what it meant to be both a mother and an agent in a world where those roles sometimes demanded impossible choices. 3 days after the biological threat had been neutralized, Emma was moved from the ICU to a regular pediatric room.
The improvement in her condition was remarkable. The post-surgical swelling had reduced significantly, her cognitive responses were sharp, and she was asking for her homework, which Dr. Chen said was the best possible sign of neurological recovery. Sarah had barely left the hospital except for quick trips home to shower and change clothes. Maria had returned to her own life, confident that Emma was out of immediate danger, but she called twice daily for updates. The nursing staff had grown accustomed to Sarah's constant presence, and several had commented on how much faster children recovered when they had dedicated family support. On Saturday morning, Sarah was helping Emma work on a modified version of her butterfly project when director Catherine Morrison appeared in the doorway. Morrison was Sarah's ultimate supervisor, a woman in her 50s who ran their entire intelligence division with the kind of strategic brilliance that had prevented numerous national security disasters over her 20-year career. "Ms. Martinez," Morrison said, her tone professional but not unkind. "I wonder if we might speak privately." Sarah looked at Emma, who was carefully coloring pictures of monarch butterfly life cycles. "Emma, I'll be right back. Keep working on your project." "Is this about work stuff again?" Emma asked, looking up from her coloring. "Just grown-up conversation," Sarah said, kissing the top of Emma's head. Morrison led Sarah to the same conference room where she had coordinated the response to the biological threat 3 days earlier. The building schematics and surveillance photos had been cleared away, leaving only a simple table and chairs. "How is Emma recovering?" Morrison asked, which surprised Sarah. The director rarely inquired about personal matters. "Better than anyone expected. Dr. Chen says she should be able to go home in a few days, and full recovery is anticipated." "I'm glad to hear that." Morrison settled into a chair across from Sarah. "Rodriguez briefed me on the events of Wednesday. Your response to the crisis was exemplary." "I almost refused the assignment entirely," Sarah said honestly. "I know. That's part of what I want to discuss with you." Morrison opened a file folder Sarah hadn't noticed her carrying. "Your personnel record shows 8 years of exceptional service. You've been involved in stopping 3 terrorist attacks, you've provided critical intelligence for dozens of international operations, and your analytical capabilities are among the best in the department." Sarah waited, sensing there was more coming. "You're also a single mother who has never once put her professional obligations ahead of her parental responsibilities until Wednesday, when the situation was so critical that the choice became impossible." "Director Morrison, if you're concerned about my reliability, I'm not." Morrison's interruption was firm. "I'm concerned about the unsustainable position we've put you in." Wednesday's situation was extraordinary, but it highlighted a fundamental problem with how we utilize agents who have significant family obligations. Sarah was quiet, unsure where this conversation was heading. "We've been developing a new division," Morrison continued. "Domestic threat assessment and response, focused specifically on protecting civilian infrastructure like hospitals, schools, and community centers. It would be based here in the city, with minimal travel requirements and a schedule that accommodates family obligations." "You're offering me a different job?" "I'm offering you the opportunity to head the new division. You would recruit and train a team of analysts and field operatives, develop protocols for domestic threat response, and coordinate with local law enforcement and emergency services. The work would be as critical as what you do now, but it would allow you to be present for Emma in ways your current position doesn't." Sarah felt a mix of excitement and skepticism. "What's the catch?" Morrison smiled slightly. "No catch, but significant challenges. You'd be building something from nothing. The bureaucracy will be frustrating. The funding will always be inadequate. And you'll be responsible for developing strategies to protect the kinds of places where children and families are most vulnerable." "Like hospitals," Sarah said, thinking of the past week. "Exactly like hospitals." "Sarah, what happened on Wednesday was a proof of concept. Your ability to understand both the security requirements and the operational realities of a medical facility, combined with your analytical skills, prevented what could have been a devastating attack." Sarah looked out the conference room window toward Emma's room, where her daughter was visible through the doorway, still working intently on her butterfly project.
I need time to think about this, Sarah said.
Of course.
Take all the time you need.
But, Sarah, I want you to know that this isn't a consolation prize or a way to sideline you because of family obligations. This is recognition that your unique perspective as both an agent and a parent might be exactly what we need to address emerging domestic threats.
After Morrison left, Sarah returned to Emma's room.
Her daughter looked up with the bright smile that had been Sarah's anchor throughout this entire ordeal.
Was that about your superhero work? Emma asked. Sarah laughed, remembering Emma's earlier assessment of her job. Something like that. How's your project coming?
Really good.
Look, I wrote about how monarch butterflies migrate thousands of miles to protect their babies.
The parent butterflies don't even live long enough to see their children grow up, but they make sure they end up somewhere safe.
Sarah looked at Emma's careful writing about butterfly migration patterns, struck by the parallel Emma had unknowingly drawn. That's very interesting, Em. Dr. Chen said I could present my project to the other kids in the pediatric ward when I'm feeling better.
She said some of them might like learning about butterflies while they're getting better.
An idea began forming in Sarah's mind. Emma, how would you feel if Mom had a job where she could work here in the city and be home with you every night? Emma's face lit up. Really? No more business trips?
No more business trips.
And you could help protect children like when the bad guys wanted to hurt kids in hospitals?
Yes, exactly like that.
Emma considered this seriously. I think that would be good.
Then, you could be a superhero who comes home for dinner. That afternoon, Dr. Chen stopped by during her rounds with news that Emma could be discharged on Monday if her recovery continued at the current pace.
She's exceeded every expectation, Dr. Chen said.
Her cognitive function is completely intact, her motor skills are normal, and the surgical site is healing beautifully. She'll need follow-up appointments and some restrictions on physical activity for a few weeks, but she should be able to return to school within the month.
Will there be any long-term effects? Sarah asked.
It's possible she'll experience some mild headaches or fatigue for a few months as her brain continues healing, but based on her recovery so far, I expect her to make a complete return to normal function.
Sarah felt tears of relief she hadn't realized she was holding back. Thank you, Dr. Chen. For everything. Ms. Martinez, can I ask you something personal?
Of course. Whatever work you do that brought federal agents to my hospital this week, I hope you know how much it matters. Those agents told me that children's lives were saved because of your expertise.
I was just doing my job.
No, Dr. Chen said firmly. You were doing much more than that. You were protecting other people's children while your own child was in critical condition.
That's not just professional duty. That's something else entirely. That evening, after Emma had fallen asleep, Sarah called Morrison.
I'll take the position, she said without preamble.
I'm pleased to hear that. When would you like to start? After Emma is fully recovered and back in school. I'd estimate 6 to 8 weeks. That timing works perfectly.
We'll need that long to secure office space and begin the bureaucratic process of establishing the new division.
Director Morrison, I have some conditions. I'm listening. I want Rodriguez as my second in command.
He understands how to balance operational requirements with real-world limitations.
Done. I want input on team recruitment.
If we're going to specialize in protecting civilian infrastructure, I want agents who understand what it means to have personal stakes in those environments.
Agreed. What else?
I want our protocols to include coordination with medical staff, school administrators, and community leaders.
This can't be a top-down security approach. It has to be collaborative. Sarah, you're already thinking like a division head. Yes to all of your conditions. After ending the call, Sarah sat in the hospital room watching Emma sleep.
Outside the windows, the city lights created patterns that reminded her of Emma's butterfly drawings, scattered but purposeful, each light representing someone's home, someone's family, someone's reason to feel safe.
Emma stirred in her sleep and spoke softly, "Mom? I'm here, baby."
I was dreaming about the butterflies again. But this time they weren't just protecting their babies. They were helping other butterflies protect their babies too.
Sarah smiled in the darkness.
That sounds like a very good dream.
It was.
And you were there, helping the butterflies know where it was safe to go. Emma drifted back to sleep, leaving Sarah with the profound realization that her 8-year-old daughter had just perfectly described the job she had accepted. Helping families know where it was safe to go, creating security that allowed children to grow and learn and recover without fear. On Sunday, Rodriguez stopped by the hospital to visit. He brought Emma a book about butterfly migration patterns and a small potted plant that he said was supposed to attract monarchs. "The director told me about your new position," he said while Emma was showing the plant to her nurse. "I hope you're interested in a career change," Sarah said.
"Are you kidding? The chance to work with you on something this important? I'm in. It won't be as exciting as international operations." Rodriguez looked toward Emma's room, where she was carefully reading her new book to her nurse. "Sarah, excitement is overrated. Making sure kids like Emma can go to school and play in hospitals without worrying about threats? That's the kind of work that actually matters." That evening, Sarah helped Emma pack her few belongings in preparation for going home the next day. Emma's butterfly project had grown into a small presentation folder, complete with drawings, research, and what she called important butterfly facts. "Mom," Emma said as she carefully placed her project in a folder, "when I grow up and help protect children like you do, I want to make sure they feel safe enough to learn about things they love." "What do you mean?" "Like how I got to learn about butterflies even when I was in the hospital with a hurt head. If kids feel safe, they can keep being curious about the world."
Sarah looked at her daughter, really looked at her, and saw not just the 8-year-old who had survived a serious accident and major surgery, but a young person who was already developing her own understanding of what it meant to protect and care for others.
"Emma, I think you're going to be very good at whatever job you choose when you grow up. Will you teach me about keeping people safe?" "I'll teach you everything I know about it," Sarah promised.
As they settled in for their last night in the hospital, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in the space of a week. Emma's accident had been terrifying, but it had also led to opportunities and insights she never would have had otherwise. She was about to embark on a new career that would allow her to be present for Emma's childhood while still doing meaningful work to protect others. Emma had not only survived her injury but had developed a deeper understanding of resilience and service. And Sarah had learned that sometimes the most impossible choices lead to the most important discoveries about what truly matters. Tomorrow, they would go home and begin the next phase of their lives together. Sarah would start planning a new intelligence division, Emma would continue recovering and preparing to return to school, and both of them would carry forward the lessons learned from a week when everything changed but somehow ended up exactly where it needed to be. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the conference room of the newly established Domestic Security Response Division, watching her team conduct their first major training exercise. The office space was modest but functional, located in a building that allowed easy access to local hospitals, schools, and community centers. Through the windows, she could see Emma's school in the distance, where her daughter had returned 3 months earlier with no lasting effects from her brain surgery. The team Sarah had assembled reflected her commitment to agents who understood personal stakes in civilian protection. Rodriguez had recruited former military personnel who were parents themselves. Dr. Patricia Chen had agreed to serve as their medical liaison, providing expertise on hospital security protocols. Even Principal Williams from Emma's school had joined as a consultant on educational facility safety. "Sarah," Rodriguez called from his desk, "we have a situation developing at Lincoln Elementary." Sarah's blood chilled for a moment before she remembered that Emma attended Roosevelt Elementary, not Lincoln. But the protective instinct was the same somewhere. Children were in potential danger, and it was her job to ensure their safety. "What's the nature of the threat?" she asked, moving to the situation room they had established. "Anonymous tip about a possible explosive device in the school's main office. Local police are responding, but they've requested our assessment capabilities." Sarah looked at the clock. 10:30 a.m. on a Tuesday.
Lincoln Elementary would have approximately 400 children and staff on campus. Deploy Team Alpha for threat assessment. Coordinate with the principal for controlled evacuation protocols. I want medical teams standing by and communication established with all parents within 15 minutes. As her team sprang into action with the efficiency they had trained for over the past several months, Sarah realized how much her perspective on crisis response had evolved. 6 months ago, during the hospital threat, she had been torn between her professional obligations and her personal fears. Now, her personal experience as a parent informed and strengthened her professional response. Agent Miller, one of the newer team members, approached with a tablet showing the school's floor plan. Sarah, we have a complication.
The device, if it exists, is reportedly in the office adjacent to the special needs classroom.
Evacuation of those children will require additional time and specialized assistance.
Sarah studied the layout, thinking of Emma's friend Marcus, who was in a special needs program at Roosevelt. Contact the school district's special education coordinator. I want protocols for assisting children with mobility, sensory, and cognitive support needs.
No child gets left behind because evacuation takes longer.
The situation at Lincoln Elementary resolved within 2 hours. The suspicious package turned out to be a forgotten lunch bag that a janitor had placed in an unusual location, but the response had been valuable training for Sarah's team. They had successfully coordinated with local emergency services, implemented evacuation protocols that accounted for all children's needs, and maintained communication with families throughout the process.
Debrief in 30 minutes, Sarah announced as her team returned to the office.
I want to review our response times and identify areas for improvement. Dr. Chen, who had been on site as their medical coordinator, stopped by Sarah's office. The school nurse mentioned something interesting, she said.
Several children asked if you were the same agent whose daughter went to school nearby.
Apparently, Emma has been talking about her mom's work protecting children.
Sarah smiled.
Emma had indeed become something of a local celebrity at Roosevelt Elementary after giving her butterfly presentation to multiple classes and explaining that her mother's job was keeping kids safe so they could learn about things they love.
How is Emma doing with all of this attention? Dr. Chen asked. She's handling it better than I expected.
Actually, she's been asking if she can visit our office and see how we coordinate responses.
That might not be a bad idea.
Children often have insights that adults miss about what makes them feel safe versus what makes them feel more anxious.
That evening, Sarah arrived home to find Emma at the kitchen table, working on a new project.
Instead of butterflies, she was drawing detailed maps of their neighborhood with notes about safe places and emergency procedures.
What's all this, Em? Sarah asked, setting down her briefcase.
It's for my safety ambassador project at school, Emma said proudly. Principal Williams said I could help other kids understand emergency procedures because I have experience with being brave in scary situations. Sarah sat down beside her daughter, impressed by the thoroughness of Emma's work. She had mapped out evacuation routes from the school, identified meeting places for families, and even included notes about which businesses in the area had first aid supplies.
This is incredible work, Emma. How did you think of all these details?
I remembered being in the hospital and how it felt better when I understood what was happening and what the plan was.
I think other kids would feel better if they understood the safety plans too.
Sarah looked at her daughter's carefully drawn maps and detailed notes, seeing the analytical mind that had helped Emma survive her own medical crisis now being applied to help other children feel prepared and safe.
Em, would you like to visit my office sometime and see how my team coordinates safety responses? Emma's face lit up. Really? Could I meet the people who help keep schools and hospitals safe? I think they would love to meet you too. The following week, Emma visited the DSRD office during a training day.
Sarah watched as her daughter observed team exercises with the same focused attention she had brought to her butterfly research. Emma asked thoughtful questions about communication protocols and evacuation procedures, and several team members commented on her insights. You know, Rodriguez said to Sarah as they watched Emma helping Agent Miller organize emergency supply kits, she's got the same analytical instincts you do. But she also has something else.
What's that? She understands what it feels like to be the person who needs protection. That's a perspective we can't teach. During the visit, Sarah received an emergency call about a potential threat at Cedar Hills Hospital, the same hospital where Emma had undergone surgery. The irony wasn't lost on her as she coordinated response protocols for the place that had become so significant in their lives. "Mom," Emma said as Sarah discussed security measures with her team, "are you protecting other kids who are scared in the hospital like I was?" "Yes, baby. We're making sure children and families can focus on getting better without worrying about other scary things." "That's good," Emma said simply. "When I was there, all I wanted was to feel safe so I could think about butterflies and not about being afraid." The hospital situation was resolved quickly. It had been a miscommunication about a delivery schedule rather than an actual threat, but Emma's observation stayed with Sarah throughout the rest of the day. That weekend, Sarah and Emma worked together on a presentation that Emma would give to Sarah's team about what makes children feel safe during emergencies. Emma's insights were profound in their simplicity: clear information, calm adult voices, understanding what would happen next, and knowing that someone was specifically thinking about their individual needs. "Children don't need to know all the scary details," Emma explained to the team of experienced agents and emergency responders. "But they need to know that the adults have a good plan and that someone will stay with them." Agent Martinez, one of Rodriguez's recruits, raised his hand. "Emma, when you were in the hospital and your mom had to help with the emergency, what would have made you feel safest?" Emma considered the question seriously. "I think if someone had told me that mom helping other kids meant that other moms could stay with their kids. Like, if I understood that her job was making sure no family had to be as scared as we were." Sarah felt tears threatening as she realized that Emma had articulated something Sarah herself had struggled with for months. The balance between personal and professional obligations wasn't about choosing between them, but about understanding how they could reinforce each other. After Emma's presentation, Director Morrison, who had attended virtually, requested a private conversation with Sarah. "That was extraordinary," Morrison said. "Emma's perspective on family-centered emergency response is exactly the kind of thinking that could revolutionize how we approach civilian protection." "She's pretty remarkable," Sarah agreed. "Sarah, I have a proposal. We're developing a new training program for agents who work in family-oriented environments, schools, hospitals, community centers. Would you consider developing a curriculum that incorporates insights from families who have experienced emergencies?" "You mean involve families like Emma and me in training agents?" "Exactly. Not just as case studies, but as consultants who can provide real-world perspective on what effective protection looks like from the civilian side." Sarah thought about Emma's presentation, about the insights that had come from their shared experience of navigating crisis while maintaining their relationship as mother and daughter. "I think Emma would love that," Sarah said. "And I think it could make our agents more effective." 3 months later, Sarah and Emma were co-presenting at a national conference on domestic security response. Emma, now 9 and showing no lasting effects from her brain surgery, had become articulate about the intersection of emergency preparedness and child psychology. "The most important thing," Emma told a room full of federal agents, local law enforcement, and emergency responders, "is that children need to know someone is thinking about them specifically, not just about all the kids. We need to know that our individual situation matters." In the audience, Sarah watched colleagues taking notes on insights from her 9-year-old daughter. Emma had evolved from the scared child in the ICU to a confident young person who understood that her experience of vulnerability could help protect other children. After the presentation, they were approached by Dr. Chen, who had flown in from their home city to attend the conference. "Emma," Dr. Chen said, "I have something to tell you. Remember how you wanted to present your butterfly project to other children in the hospital? We've started a program where children who have recovered from serious illnesses come back to talk to current patients about staying curious and hopeful during treatment." "Really?" Emma's eyes widened with excitement. "Really? And we'd like you to be our first young recovery ambassador." Sarah watched Emma consider this opportunity with the same serious thoughtfulness she brought to all her projects. "Would I get to help kids feel safe while they're learning about things they love?" Emma asked. "That would be exactly your job," Dr. Chen confirmed. "Then, yes," Emma said. I'd like to help.
That evening, in their hotel room, Sarah tucked Emma into bed and reflected on how completely their lives had transformed since that terrible day when Emma fell from the playground equipment.
Mom, Emma said sleepily, do you think everything that happened to us happened for a reason? Sarah considered the question. I think terrible things happen randomly, Em.
But I think how we respond to them can create meaning and purpose. Like how my brain surgery led to you getting a job where you can help protect other families. And how your experience in the hospital led to you helping other children feel brave and curious even when they're scared.
Emma nodded thoughtfully. So we turned something scary into something helpful.
We did, baby.
We absolutely did. As Emma drifted off to sleep, Sarah looked out the hotel window at the city lights below.
Somewhere in that sprawl of buildings were families like hers, parents trying to balance work and love, children navigating challenges they never expected to face, communities working to keep everyone safe and connected.
Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from Rodriguez. Chicago PD is requesting a consultation on school security protocols. Are you and Emma available next month for a training session? Sarah smiled as she typed back, we'll be there.
She had found her calling not in spite of being Emma's mother, but because of it. The experience of nearly losing her daughter, of facing impossible choices between duty and love, had led her to work that honored both her professional skills and her deepest personal commitments. Emma stirred in her sleep and mumbled something about butterflies and safety plans. Sarah gently smoothed her daughter's hair, grateful beyond measure for the journey that had brought them to this point where Emma's recovery had become the foundation for protecting other children and where Sarah's expertise had evolved to encompass not just threat assessment but family-centered security. Tomorrow they would fly home, where Sarah would continue building her division and Emma would return to school and her work as a young recovery ambassador. They would carry forward the lessons learned from trauma transformed into purpose, from crisis converted into calling, and from a mother and daughter who had discovered that their greatest strength came not from choosing between love and duty, but from finding ways to honor both completely. In the quiet of the hotel room, with her daughter sleeping peacefully beside her, Sarah understood that this was what victory looked like, not the absence of threat or struggle, but the presence of meaning, purpose, and unshakable connection between people who choose to protect what matters most.